Okay, look, just a wee video as promised in relation to what I would say are marking points on the AS specification for the coursework that there really should be full marks if a student does these things diligently and they're carefully checked. Look, the first one is the most straightforward, but again, very few students, in fact, get top marks here, and that's just literally spelling, punctuation, and grammar. There is a requirement to use specialist vocabulary. That never really generally is an issue. It just means if you're doing the likes of wind, that you're using kinetic energy and some key terms associated with wind technology. It can be the Betz limit, tip speed ratio, different parts of the actual turbine itself, rotor, blades, nacelle, tower, gearbox, whatever. That's not really the issue. The main issue is primarily in relation to spelling, punctuation, and grammar. That just might be some words that are capitalized that shouldn't be, and some words that are reversed that should be capitalized and they aren't, start of a sentence and stuff, full stops maybe missing, commas in, and just be simple things like that. Other key things to watch out for would be stuff like kilowatt hour. So we'll be using this quite a bit in the project, and it needs to be a small k, a capital W, and a small h. So again, if a student does all those capital and does that repeatedly through the report, again, there's going to be big hits there in relation to the spelling, punctuation, and grammar. As for energy, another one is just for power. It's similar, but it's now just kilowatts, so small k, capital W. Another couple that would usually spring to mind is CO2. So again, that's wrong. You have to go into Microsoft Word, select to and subscript it to make it a wee small number towards the lower right-hand side. Similarly, if you're doing stuff like area, it's not M2, which some students put down. It should be meters squared. You have to catch that too and then subscript it, or superscript it, sorry, in Microsoft Word. Again, if you do that multiple times in your report, you will lose big marks. So it's just a case of just being really careful there. The second thing is just to use the Harvard referencing system. Again, there are videos in there showcasing how to do that for websites and for textbooks and stuff. Most of the data will come from online sources, websites and whatnot. And again, it's important to use that method. In the event you come across a corporation that's given data, it might be a manufacturer of a solar panel or a wind turbine or a provider of like a biomass boiler or something. If they don't give the name of somebody there, you just select corporate author and then you just type in the details of the corporation. We're giving credit that information to the actual corporation itself. The third one here is just really like a methodology for each of the two practicals when you get the task 2. So it's in bullet point form. That's super important to make it readable, and it needs to have all the necessary details. A big probably thing is just making sure you mention the instruments. So, if you want to measure voltage, say you have to use a voltmeter, or if you're measuring current, you're using an ammeter. I know in our own school, we're measuring very small currents, so we measure both the voltage and the current using a multimeter. That's important. If you're measuring even a length or something, again, put down you're using measuring tape and give details of where those measurements are taken from. So point A, and we're measuring across to point B. Again, that level of detail is particularly important as well. So bullet point form, just those extra details are required. Another one is just the data has to be presented in a range of formats. So for the wind and the solar practical, like your data must be presented in tabular form and in a graph. All right, for the biomass, I'm happy enough to accept for my students just in tabular form, but I need a graph in there for wind and solar. That just ticks off that box. And then down beneath each of those practicals, you have to analyze them. So what are the results telling us? And then did we expect to get that? And then importantly, if you want to reach up into the higher grades in A or A star, what's the implications of this information for the client's project? And if you don't make those links and take it back to the needs of the client, again, you're highly unlikely to get full marks. The last one is just a risk assessment. So different schools would probably, the default would be to do like a wee table now. You need to be 4 risks, at least 4 risks for each particular practical. And at least three of those risks have to be specific to the practical you're doing. And what I mean by specific, if I just put down like a general risk, look, there's water on the floor, somebody could slip and fall and hurt themselves. That's not specific to wind or biomass or solar. Something that is specific to wind might be, look, a blade might come off accidentally at high speed, hit somebody in the eye. That's specific, that's okay. You need 3 things like that at least for each practical. Another thing as well is just to make sure in each risk you identify the injury that can occur. So again, there's no point in me saying a risk is I can slip on water on the floor and then full stop. I would like to see the potential injuries in there, such as I could slip and fall back, break my wrist, break my elbow, smash my hip, bang my head at the edge of the table and lose sight in an eye. You want what injury we might incur in each of those specific risks as well. So look, that's just five of the marking criteria out of a total of 14 that I would argue there is no excuse for not getting full marks there for a student who is diligent, who's drafted numerous different versions of the report and checked it themselves, and then perhaps onboarded one or two other people just to sort of read through it and make sure there's no major anomalies and things that don't make sense. And that's pretty much it.